why didn't you give it as a criminal referral? If you believe that her statement is true, and it was sexual harassment, and that is a violation of the law, why, and you allowed him to just retire, why didn't you send that to the proper authorities?
We took the appropriate action.
Do you think it's appropriate? Do you think it's against the law to sexually harass somebody at work?
I think it's not only against the law, but it's also against our policies, and we acted under the policies and the law when it led to the removal of him from public.
Did you let any of the law enforcement officers know?
Mr. Chaffetz, I have 2 young daughters just about this woman's
I got 2 young daughters too, and I would never send them to the EPA. It's the most toxic place to work I've ever heard of. This person, this 24-year-old girl, she's starting her career. She's harassed over a 3-year period. And you admit that that is a violation of the law. Why didn't you do the criminal referral?
There was absolutely no information that I was aware of, or that the people investigating this when this intern spoke up, that there was any consistent harassment until the day she spoke up. I am not blaming her. She is in a very difficult situation that none of us want her to be in.
When she did speak up.
But we can't know things that have never been, when things aren't spoken up.
Looking at the record now, are you going to do a criminal referral? You got to ask somebody. You're the administrator.
Well, I'm happy to move forward in whatever
You're
direction
happy.
people
I don't want
to
you to be happy. I want you to do the right thing. He should have been fired. And at the very least, you should do a criminal referral. How many times does this happen and you don't do a criminal referral? I mean, we had the case where we had to bring you up and talk about Mr. Jutro. So why is there such a toxic environment? I want to know why there's no criminal referral. You didn't do it then, and you're not willing to do it now. Why?
The individual could have. We responded appropriately under our policies and the law. If additional work is necessary or referrals, we're happy to do that. I didn't make a decision that this shouldn't move there. I operated under the policies and the law to move forward. And in fact, we expedited this in a way that Mr. Cummings has been asking us to do for a long time.
Do you believe,
which is quickly and decisively.
Do you believe you have an obligation under the law, if you know of sexual harassment, to report that to the legal authorities?
I'm not aware of that obligation, no. I am aware that we have to follow it up and appropriately take steps that are appropriate for the circumstances, which is exactly what we did.
Your appropriate steps were to move them 4 cubicles away. Do you think that was appropriate?
No, my step, and the step that led to his removal is what I'm referring to. I do not know what you're referring to in terms of
I've given you probably a dozen chances to say, and I'll give you one more time before I recognize Mr. Cummings. If you have knowledge of criminal activity, do you believe you have an obligation to report that to law enforcement?
I did not treat this as a criminal activity as opposed to an appropriate anti-harassment issue.
Do you believe the 3 witnesses that were here prior, do you believe they were retaliated against?
No, I do not.
Not in any way, shape, or form?
You know, I think that, Mr. Chairman, I want to just confirm that harassment of any kind isn't tolerated. You know, as a 61-year-old woman who started in a man's field, this is not the question I asked you. I don't want to know about your background. I want to know if you think that they were retaliated against. No, sir.
We heard nearly 2 hours of testimony, and you believe that their statements are false.
No, I did not indicate
Well, they said that they were each retaliated against, and you said that's not the case.
I indicated that what I look at is the entire facts around the case. And clearly, we had confusion in how we investigated it, but they were part of a large team that actually recommended removal of that employee, and they are no longer in federal
And part of the
service.
criticism—
There was nothing to retaliate, and retaliation will not be tolerated.
Mr. Tuttle has a lower grade, less responsibility. You don't think that that was a result of some of his complaints against management?
There were issues long before the issue of sexual harassment that arose about Mr. Tuttle's performance that's well documented, and he still is a productive and valued member of EPA's.
What is your definition of sexual harassment?
It's the same as in the law, sir, and any harassment or bullying is not tolerated at EPA. This is not a question
When you say not tolerated, they have documented multiple cases, up to 10 times, of sexual harassment against this intern. Did you ever do—
I think, sir, if you look at the entire record, you'll see that these are regular performance issues that we have resolved separately. It is not a retaliation.
Was there any criminal referral?
Was there any criminal referral in this
The answer is
particular
no,
case?
and I want to know.
I don't believe so.
You said that the definition of sexual harassment, you agree, is what is in law. So if it's illegal, the kissing, the touching, the inappropriate behavior is against the law, why didn't you refer that for criminal prosecution?
It was properly referred to the correct agencies within the agency.
Which agencies?
The Office of Human Resources in that region.
That's within your own agency. It's against the law. It's not against your own policies and procedures. What these people testified to is they had to step up, go to the mat, and say offering a reprimand is not sufficient. I want to know why somebody.
The employee was removed, sir, not reprimanded. He was removed from service.
But the problem is they had 10 victims to get to that point. Now, granted, you are not the administrator the entire time. I understand that. But this predator, the quote we heard, this is a predator who was fed a steady diet of interns. The first time it should have happened, he should have been fired, and he should have probably been referred to the authorities for criminal prosecution. It happened 10 times, and you never did that. You still haven't done that in this person.
I am aware that 11 years ago there was an issue raised, and it was handled appropriately, as my
Appropriately, he
understanding.
got a promotion. He continued to work there.
He was carefully watched the very minute
Watched?
we had any
Who's watching him?
indication-
Who's
The very
watching
minute
him?
we had any indication of impropriety, which was the recent issue, we took prompt action, and in less
You
than
moved
2
his
months,
cubicle
that man left federal service.
You moved his cubicle four spaces away. You think that's appropriate? What do you say to the mother and father who sent their 24-year-old to the EPA? She's starting her career, and she's harassed. Look at her statement. And you did the appropriate thing by moving her 4 cubicles
Sir, we are
away?
doing everything we can to reinforce the policy and the law. We are developing procedures so there's never a question about this, and we are doing everything
That
we
isn't good
can
enough.
to protect
When
every
somebody is
employee in the
sexually
agency.
harassed, you send them to the authorities. You fire them.
I did send them the correct authorities.
You sent them
sir.
to Human Resources, who wanted to reprimand them. You never did send them to the criminal
Human
referral.
Resources recommended the same thing as every manager, which was to actually proceed to removal. The man is no longer in federal.
That's not what initially happened. He was in his record that they had 10 complaints, 10 sexual harassment complaints against this gentleman, and he was allowed to continue to be there. And as we heard testimony, a predator who's fed a steady diet of interns.
I am aware of one complaint 11 years ago, and the complaint that was just processed under my watch, which resulted in his removal from public service within 5 or 6
Did you
weeks.
fire him, or was he allowed to retire?
He was allowed to retire because that is his right.
Yeah.
Even
I'm
if
telling-
he were fired, he
why
would be
didn't
allowed
you-
to retire.
Do you believe that this intern who said that there was sexual harassment, do you believe that her statement is true?
Oh, I absolutely do, and that
Then
was
why didn't you
actually the
refer it
joint
for a criminal
agreement that
referral?
everybody came to. That's
And
how it's worked. That's how it's done.
And that's the crying shame. Because you know what? Sexual harassment, it is a crime. And you need to take it more seriously. And it needs to go to the legal authorities. And that's the failing on your watch, on what you're doing.
Part of the challenge, Mr. Chair, is I am happy to talk to the woman involved, but part of the decision is that that woman chose a number of different paths she could take. It is always open to her. Frankly, I'm not comfortable making decisions for a young woman who probably wants to move on when I have already taken all of the actions I can do under my own authority.
You didn't separate
and I'm
them.
not sure
You didn't
should
move away.
make that decision on her behalf either.
Anybody who looks at this case, you fell far short of that. I now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much.